And senior partner, Zenera consultant Mecca Lola is in the studio to tell us what this means for Nigeria. It's good to have you with us.
Good to be here.
All right, so can you help us understand the key factors now driving oil prices? And we understand there's a price increase as well recently.
Yeah. So there's always volatility in the region. So you have, geopolitical factors that drive these prices. So if there's an issue with Saudi, Russia, Venezuela, even Nigeria, it tends to move those prices either up or down. OPEC is another, factor because it's a cartel that has members contributing about 30% of global productions. But usually the main factor is unrest and geopolitical factors.
Well, staying with the topic of geopolitical factors and the volatility there, we know that yesterday US President Donald Trump called for more sanctions against Iran. It's not a surprise. They've been butting heads the last couple of years.
Yeah.
What do you think what kind of effect does that have on the oil prices?
So there's a big sanction already against Iran, so their production is very limited. I think they hover around 1 million barrels a day, when potentially they can do up to 3 or 4. So what happens is, I don't see it having a significant effect. I don't think it's more about the sanctions than the rumors of war, okay? What is going to happen in the sub-region? Because what's going on is, Saudi Arabia is saying Iran is responsible for the drone and the missile attack. If it was just a drone attack, you could have attributed it to a rogue event, right? But when you start hearing missiles, then it has a different connotation, right? So Houthi said they were the ones, they were just trying to score some political point, but the facts remain that right now we're dealing with a major issue, which is the potential that the sub-region can degenerate into chaos. And that, because the oil prices are driven by speculation, pretty much, right? And that is what potentially can have the most devastating impact. The sanctions, yes, is actually, when the sanctions were reeled out, the recent ones by the US president, he actually stabilized the prices a bit because it brought in predictability, to the scenario. So, okay, this is the worst that can happen. We've seen it. There will be sanctions, right? And that's all. The region can go back to normalcy, right? But when there is uncertainty, which is what the war and the rumors of war, tends to cause, that is even a bigger problem than sanctions.
You're right, a major development there indeed. Now let's come back home a little. What's the implication of the current rise in crude oil prices in line with Nigeria's current crude benchmark budget-wise, you think?
It's actually good news. Any producing nation that is not under sanction, right, usually celebrates an increase in prices. Okay. This year we predicated the prices at $60 per barrel, the budget. Next year is going to 55. It's coming down to $55 per barrel. So if you're doing 65 now, and with the potential that after the Vienna meeting it may go up, to about $75 per barrel, it means it's good news for the performance of the budget. Okay, but that is one hand. The reality, which is the implementation of the budget and its execution, is another. How much are we producing? Okay, so on one hand, the prices are good for us, but it's only if we can produce the numbers that we require to rake in the revenues. Unfortunately, Nigeria isn't doing very well regarding that. The indigenous oil companies are groaning, with force majeures every day. There's vandalization, there's theft. The crude oil theft is very bad. Okay, so Nigeria is not, in my own estimation, in a position to maximize the opportunity. Okay. It's there, it's going to, but it's still better than if the prices were now up. Sure. Yeah, definitely, but we can do much better.
I mean, talking about doing much better, give us more specifics on what Nigeria needs to do to fully take advantage of this current hike.
Okay. Right now, we're doing about 8.8 million barrels a day, all right? We should be doing about 2.4 million barrels a day, easily. And if you see what happened in Saudi Arabia, after a few days, they're able to stabilize and go back to their attack numbers because you have strategic reserves that you are able to wet, your supply with, okay? Nigeria is not in a position to do that, right? So we are barely struggling to meet up, production quotas, barely, right? So depending on who you ask, our numbers sometimes go as low as 1.2 million barrels a day, 1.4 million barrels a day. Do you understand? It went as far as less than 1 million barrels a day, okay? But these numbers are very underreported because it doesn't look good for the nation and for the global market as well, because we don't want to send signals, that will trigger, unrest or in terms of, the factors I mentioned earlier lead to, volatility. So Nigeria is very careful, image-wise, branding-wise, in terms of the sort of signals that we send. But having said that, we need to come back and say, what are the issues that we're having, right? And how can we mitigate this risk that always sort of stymies us from being able to maximize this potential, right? And that is vandalism, oil theft. The guys that we've sent, even the security, apparatus that Nigeria put in place to safeguard its investments are not working, optimally, okay? So if you're losing, so even the vice president admitted that Nigeria was losing about $4.8 billion per annum, okay? He said 400,000 barrels a day, which translates roughly to about that, okay? But the real figures are in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 billion dollars. How much is our entire budget? Do you understand? So when you start to look at it, we've said before, and we've come, to ask the government to declare a state of emergency in the oil and gas sector. You have to do something radical. You have to do something you've not done before. It's foolhardy to expect a different result by doing the same set of things over and over again. Indeed. We haven't done anything differently. Why are we expecting, a different outcome?
Very good. And still talking about emergency scenarios, just like the Saudi Arabia was able to draw from its inventories, just like you mentioned earlier. But what cues should Nigeria take from that?
Okay. So in everything in life, sports, if you want to do 10 seconds in 100 meters race, right? As a sportsman, make sure during practice you're already doing maybe 9.8, 9.7. You must outperform your potential average per time. That's what it means. Okay, so they were able to do that because they have reserves, and Saudi Arabia can do 12 million barrels a day easily, even though its quota, its contribution is 9.8. So when they suffer any attack, they just adjust. Either they go to the strategic reserves or they pump out more from existing facilities, right? We need to get to that point. And the fastest way is to make sure that those who are handling strategic investments, where you put your most money, are people in the private sector. Government has demonstrated that they don't have the capability to run the oil and gas industry in Nigeria.
It's no secret that oil, when managed correctly, can make a lot of money for a country.
Yeah.
And we've seen the emergence of oil do great things in other countries. Norway, for example, they've been able to fully take advantage of their oil and resource wealth. It's not been the case for many countries, Nigeria included. If we were to look at oil being a blessing for some and a curse for others, what do you think the difference is, briefly?
So I think the difference is being able to balance the inequality curve, okay? So Norway that you mentioned, for example, makes about $40 million from oil, right? The inequality curve is very short, so the difference between its citizenry is not much. They are all wealthy. The nation is at peace. But look at Nigeria. Just oppose that scenario with the Niger Delta. The inequality ratio is just so much. So we make 90%, 95% of the revenues that government has is from oil. But the entire economy, the GDP of Nigeria It's not from oil. It's up just about 5%, right? There's something not quite right there. So we must start to look and say, how do we make the guys producing this oil happy?
We were talking about the imbroglio with Saudi Arabia, Iran, as it were, and other geopolitical factors as well. But I'd still like us to come back home a little. Talking about the modular refineries, which were supposed to support existing infrastructure, and you will agree that the existing infrastructure still has one or two issues, as it were. So what are your thoughts there? We're not hearing anything about that.
So it's a very vexed issue. The former Minister of State for Petroleum Resources thought by now issues of importation will have gone to rest. In fact, he said he was going to resign if Nigeria was still importing refined petroleum products.
That didn't happen.
That didn't happen. And, you don't know when that is going to happen because the issues are endemic and they're very significant, okay? So we will get to the point, that's the truth. We believe in the industry. At some point, Nigeria is going to attain self-sufficiency. But the things that need to happen between now and then are landmark milestones. All right, so we have to see, the bill governing the industry has to improve. We have to deregulate the downstream market, which is the fuel retailing market. We have to have the political will to take the right decisions for the country. We have to privatize, and decouple the regulatory function of NNPC from the commercial. So until those things are done, you're not going to attract the right set of numbers because, it's only profitable for Nigeria to run its own refineries right now with the cap on fuel prices, right? Because it's a state organization. A private organization won't find that interesting, all right? So those are significant issues that need to be resolved before we can see any significant movement.
Well, talking about resolutions, I mean, definitely nationwide, we've heard very little about the implementation of these new petroleum reform bills. I mean, some would even say that the status quo as it is now is fine. What do you say about that?
I mean, for political reasons, people say that, it's better to perpetuate status quo, but I don't think it's right for the future of the generations that are coming afterwards, In a nutshell, for ease of understanding, is just to separate the functions of the industry into policy, regulatory, and commercial. That's what the bill is all about, right? But it's been passed on. The president has refused to give his assent. He says issues like, the policy, aspects of it, where granting of license would then cease to be his own prerogative, right, is an issue. And the fact that the proposed PRC, which will be responsible for granting of licenses in the new dispensation, will retain 10% of the revenue, is not acceptable to them. And under the pretext that, it will reduce, the pot that is available for the various tiers of government to share. But the truth is that it's just all politics, right? Because it pays, it's a lot of power that the Minister of Petroleum Resources wields under the new dispensation. And all of that is going to go away, So they are not happy with that, okay? Because if you did that, then everybody clamoring around you and saying, sign my oil leases and renew, all of those things will not be happening again, Let's always think about the indigenous players who are suffering in silence. They don't have, the militancy in the region is so bad, yet these guys cannot even declare the force majeure that they require to get a breather from creditors because they would rather be scavenging the little, if you're doing 100,000 barrels, you've shot in 60 or 70, you'd rather still be doing the 30,000 barrels, right? And then you have government overhang on your head saying you can't under-declare, you can't say all of this because we need to be politically correct, we need to look good, from a perception point of view. You have issues plaguing you, you have creditors. These guys are suffering. Government needs to so apart from the Niger Deltas, which we have said something needs to be done, even the indigenous oil producing companies are groaning. They are suffering. Until all those dynamics change, we're still going to be, dancing around in circle.
Interesting scenario there. And on that note, Mika Lola, always a pleasure to have you. Senior partner, Sinera Consulting. Many thanks for your thoughts on those issues. Good to have you.